remembers Glee? Am I just gonna rant into a void tonight? Well, I do remember watching this very popular show 10 years ago, more than that. But it is interesting in the fact that it was the first fully musical, it was a jukebox musical mostly, TV show about a school glee club, and oh my god, jeez. There were a lot of good things I got out of this, but at the same time, good. Oh, this was not what I'd call a good show, but I would say more so a guilty pleasure for a while. And then I stopped. I stopped maybe somewhere between, I want to say third or fourth season. Yeah, maybe around the third season. Here's the things I liked about Glee at the time that I still appreciate. Okay, I like theater, I like musicals. I knew who some of the actors were because I followed theater. I was a cringy, annoying theater kid, so, and everyone was talking about this show, and I'm like, I will admit, shows about theater and people pursuing theater, and I like them, but at the same time, or even singing competition shows like American Idol, even if they were very popular, even people told me to watch them, more so American Idol, but a lot of them made me feel bad about myself because all these people far more talented than me had access to opportunities I didn't, and it was hard to watch. But Glee was one, for a while it was a guilty pleasure. I stopped watching it fast, but even though I knew it was melodramatic, I appreciated it in the way someone would appreciate a soap opera. I mean, it is melodramatic as hell, and it's not realistic. I mean, characters would get slushies thrown in their face, and that is definitely not something that was happening when I was in high school. Maybe it's other people's high school experiences. It was not mine. The only time I got hit in the face with food, it was an accident, and it was middle school. So, yeah. Okay. The actors were talented. There was a lot of bitchery in that show. I will say this, though. I did appreciate just how talented the actors were. They auto-tuned them more than they really needed to, and we knew that they were talented singers and actors. It did introduce me to some really wonderful music. The big thing was Gary Puckett and the Union Gap, which is a band from the 60s, 70s era, and the lead singer has this beautiful, haunting voice. I first learned of their music through Glee because there's an episode when Rachel Berry gets a crush on the choir teacher, and he sings a mashup of the song Don't Stand So Close to Me and Young Girl. It's actually a good mashup. I know mashups were such a trend in the turn of the 2010s, but this one was legitimately well done. So that introduced me to that. I thought it was a catchy song, and then it led me to some of the original stuff. So I did learn about some really cool music through the show, and I'm really grateful for that. That being said, and even though I knew it was cheesy, and I knew it wasn't realistic, and I knew it was melodramatic, and I definitely didn't like a lot of the characters. Well, okay, that's not true. There were some I liked, there were some I really didn't like, but I think that's true with everybody who watches this show. Yeah. I think I actually was legitimately interested in the storyline at first in a very, I could get past a lot of the cheesy factor and a lot of the silliness of the show because I thought, okay, it is good it was very good at keeping me engaged. It was, especially that first season, and even somewhat into the second season. But after a while, I did lose respect for some of the characters, and that turned me off. Like, there was one in particular, the moment I really hated Shu as a character, Matthew Morrison's character, Mr. Shu, was when he intentionally seduces Sue Sylvester, and just to be an ass and break her heart. I thought, oh, fuck you. That was even though she's a lot of times the abrasive character, she's that jerk with the heart of gold character, and she can be really nasty, but she did have valleys, and she did have heart, and it was still a dick move. Yeah, I just lost so much respect for that character. He's just, okay, a character, yeah, because he's so nice, yeah. Ooh, yeah, and quite a few characters do some things that are like that, they're pretty unlikable. And that's hard when you have a few of those characters in one show. But also, it got to the point where every episode was feeling like a very special episode. It felt like the 80s PSAs that were trying to inform you but really didn't have a deep understanding of the issue they were talking about had just gone off and made a musical, and that was Glee. Glee is definitely a show a lot of people hate watch or love to hate. It was a guilty pleasure for me at first. I don't know if I could go back and watch this. But I did appreciate the talent of the cast, and they were legitimately talented. It did introduce me to some great music, and I, in a very guilty pleasure way, you know what? I'm not going to be guilty about this. I legitimately was invested in the storyline early on. And and then I don't know what people thought who kept watching it. I hadn't really followed it. I stopped, but you know, it clearly made an impact on popular culture. It did have a lot of LGBT characters at a time when it was just around the cultural shift where LGBT people were starting to get more accepted. So it did do some good that way. It did make a lot of people feel seen. It's definitely not my personality. It's definitely not my experiences, but it did a lot of good for a lot of people, and you really can't fault anything, no matter how terrible something can be, if it helps people feel seen and they're not hurting anybody as a result of it, or just they're not spreading hatred and they feel seen even by something that's not perfect. It's doing something right, and it's also something that you saw a couple LGBT characters in one show, and that was something you just didn't see at the time. I think there's always room for different representations of what it means to be queer and different kinds of queer people, so there's always room for that, and there's definitely plenty of room out there. There's plenty of stories to tell. But I can appreciate Glee for a few things, but I can also remember just what a train wreck it really got, and it was a show you could talk about. I will definitely give it that, and I'd be curious as to what other people's memories are, if it's a phenomenon you proudly stayed away from and didn't associate with the popular things like a good hipster, or if it's something you genuinely liked, or if it's something you hated, or if it's something you love to hate. It's a show that definitely inspires opinions in people, and I would be very, very curious if anyone who watches my channel watched that show, but yeah, I guess I have a similar love-hate relationship that I do with a lot of theater. You know, there's difficult personalities, but there's a lot of good that comes from it too. And both are simultaneously true. Glee? It was a thing. It was a phenomenon. It was interesting, to say the least.